So today we're going to do my Masters Toronto tier list, but this one isn't just any normal tier list because I've come prepared with some stats. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through each team and kind of their stats and then place them on the tier list. So let's start here with BLG. And for BLG, we've got, well, the way this works is you've got the 6 maps that aren't Fracture, because of course we aren't playing Fracture in Masters Toronto. Obviously, we don't know how good anyone will be at Sunset, so we've just left that off as well. And you've got the 6 maps, how many times they've played it, what their win percentages are, their attack and defensive win rates as well. And then here at the bottom, you've got their kind of overall. And this last column is kind of my rating of those maps, you know, basing it on kind of, you know, looking at these numbers plus who they played against, you know, those kind of things, and me then giving them a number. So for, you know, BLG, their average here is 5.5 of these 6 maps. Right, so this is how we would do it, and then we've got kind of the second one here as well, the second slide, which is, you know, each of the players, kind of their VLR rating. We do have an extra stat for the non-Chinese teams as well, we'll get into that in a second, with their first kill to first death ratio, kills per round, assists per round, and what maps they are picking and banning, and I'll just quickly run you through this as well. Here's we do count Fracture, because of course, if a team was heavily banning Fracture, they essentially have picked up a free ban, which obviously is a pretty big advantage as well. So we are taking a look to see if teams are banning Fracture or if they were relying on picking a lot, right? And now they're not going to be able to, right? So for instance, for BLG, they did pick Fracture a couple times and they never banned it. So that's a bit of a nerf to BLG overall. And here is my tier list. We've got the favorites here, which is spelled correctly at the top. Contenders, Dark Horse, Swiss Stage Sallies, and Swim Home. And for BLG, if you looked at their map pool there on the slide, you will have seen that they had some gun maps and some maps that, you know, weren't so good. And ultimately, I just think that for BLG, that probably means, if I had to guess, that they're gonna win a map, maybe in, you know, every series that they play, they might win a map, but I'm not so sure they'll be able to win enough maps, and so I am gonna put them in Swim Home. Okay, onto our second team, XLG, and you can see compared to BLG, you know, XLG, their map pool is, I think, substantially kind of more consistent and just better across the board, right? They, obviously, you can see here, have won a lot more maps. They do rely on Lotus a lot, right? They've played a lot of Lotus, but they've also won a lot on Lotus, right? And their kind of attacking and defensive win rates also look just better, to be honest, than a team like BLG. When you take a look at, you know, what maps they were playing a lot, you can see they are heavy kind of, you know, if Lotus is there, they pretty much just pick it. Of course, though, the thing is for them is that I don't even know, I'm assuming it's Martin is going to come in as their sub, but we don't actually even know yet, you know, who is their 5th player. Now, Raga has been absolutely destroying, as you can see here on the VLR rating. I mean, his numbers, you know, are really, really strong. And so XLG are probably actually one of the hardest teams to rate here on this overall because of the player swap. They obviously aren't starting in the Swiss stage, but I could still put them in Swiss stage Sallies if I wanted to. However, I think that that would be unfair, and I think that their numbers overall are good enough to put them in Dark Horse. Okay, next up we have MIBR, and MIBR's map pool is quite weird, where you can see that they have a very dominant icebox. Right, like 9.5, this is the joint highest score I gave to anyone on any map, and just look at the numbers, it's insane, right? There's also a pretty big difference between their attack and defense win rates you can see down here. Their overall map score I gave is slightly lower than XLG, but still, you know, pretty good overall and not too bad. But one big advantage that MIBR have is that they were banning Fracture a lot, so that means that essentially they're picking up a free ban. Because also, there's not a lot of teams that ban Icebox, if anyone. We also have this stat at the end here now for the players. Rounds above replacement stat. It's a stat that basically works at actions do you take and base that on the win probability. You can see here that players like Aspas, obviously doing pretty well. Verno as well, though, very, very high. And the average player should be 0, but I think more so the average player is about 1, to be honest, is about an average score. And you can see that obviously some players are going kind of crazy here, like Aspas and Verno. So MIBR, I think, are a tough team to rate, though, overall on the tier list, because I think they're somewhat close to XLG. I also don't know why some of the logos are so massive on this. I think it's kind of funny, so I'm keeping it. Could, I think, argue that both of these teams should be here, but you could also argue that both of them should be here. Because MIBR are getting that kind of extra advantage of, you know, not having to play Fracture now, I think I am going to put them in Dark Horse, because I think that that could lead to them, you know, having better vetoes against a lot of teams, and therefore, you know, being in a much better spot. Okay, moving on to Sentinels. You know, they're pretty decent across the board. No major weaknesses. They haven't been amazing on Lotus, and Icebox is, you know, a bit of a question mark, having only played it twice. But their Pearl is also very, very strong, right, as you can see. Sentinels also have this advantage of they were banning Fracture. And so, guess what? They're picking up a free ban. And given Sentinels past, I don't assume that they'll be banning Sunset. And so, now they might just go into Toronto again, you know, with just a free ban on their opponent. It's interesting to compare VLR rating to the rounds above replacement, because you can see, like, you know, Narrator's a bit further down on the VLR, but is a bit higher in terms of rounds above replacement as well, right? So kind of interesting. And so for me, Sentinels is a much easier one to rate overall. I don't think that they're necessarily a favorite for the tournament, but I definitely think that they are contenders. Moving on to G2, and it's gonna come as no surprise that G2's overall map pool here is very, very strong. Now, what's interesting about G2's map pool, though, is that they don't have a dominant map. In fact, there is no map where they have a 100% win rate, which might surprise you somewhat, you know, for a team like G2. But that's ended up with, you know, me giving them a very high score overall, but just having like a very solid map pool, kind of top to bottom. But also, they have been banning Fracture. It's funny, all of the Americas teams that are going to Toronto were banning Fracture. Again, they're essentially going to have a 7 map pool. Again, interesting that Trent was the highest rated players in America in terms of VLR rating, but actually on rounds above replacement, it's actually Leaf who is higher than Trent, which I also thought was, you know, quite interesting. Again, seeing how these stats kind of differ overall. And so G2, I mean, they are just good top to bottom. They're also picking up a free map ban with Fracture. I think they obviously are going into the favorites category. Moving on to Paper Rex, and Paper Rex, again, a bit mixed here overall, right? Like, they have been banning Haven most of the time. They've got a very strong map in Lotus, of course. We've seen that recently. Their win rates aren't always, for Paper Rex, like the most, you know, obvious, because of course they struggled towards the start of the split, but then, you know, as soon as they change their comp on Lotus, they have won every game that they've played on it and have been dominant in most of those games. And overall, I think they've kind of averaged out as kind of, you know, an okay kind of middle of the pack kind of team. In terms of their ban, they have been banning Haven a lot. When we take a look at the rounds above replacement, again, it's interesting. Jing, you know, way out in front. And again, Forsaken, you know, gets a pretty good VLR rating, but rounds above replacement, not so much. I think Devi, you know, we've seen him play better than this, of course, and I think if he can play better than this, then that could be a way that Paper Rex can kind of go further than maybe most people think. And so where do I put Paper Rex? Well, they're kind of overall in their map score, they're kind of similar to kind of XLG, MIBR sort of range. But unfortunately, I do think that there are reasons like XLG have been more consistent overall, and MIBR have a free map ban that's gonna make me put them in the Swiss stage Sallies. Okay, moving on to Gen G, who, in a similar sort of way, don't have maybe the most dominant map pool. They have won all of their games on Pearl, but it was against pretty weak opposition overall, so I didn't rate them too highly for that. You know, they've kind of been like okay at a lot of things, but maybe not amazing at any of them. And they also have been one of these teams that are banning Fracture, so that is in their favor that they are picking up a free ban. You've got Foxy9 actually, who is the highest rated player in both rounds above replacement and here on the VLR rating for them. Know that obviously Karen and Texture, we've seen moments from them of playing extremely well, but I think it does need to be more consistent for this team. And overall, again, I think Gen G are in this kind of like mix of MIBR, Paper Rex, XLG. They're in this kind of similar vibe, but I'm not feeling amazing about Gen G. So I think I'm actually going to put them in the Swiss stage Sallies, even though, again, they are picking up that free ban kind of like MIBR. So maybe I should put them here in the Dark Horse for now. Okay, moving on to RRQ, and again, we've got another team that kind of has ended up with kind of a very kind of solid map pool overall, but not necessarily too many highs and lows, Ascent kind of being the one map that I think RRQ would feel confident on. In terms of bans, they actually already were kind of banning for their opponent. They've had a lot of mixed bans, as you can see here, banning, you know, 5 different maps essentially, and picking a lot of Ascent and Icebox. Really a lot, though, I think, of RRQ does depend on Jemkin, right? His rounds above replacement is crazy high. I think this is probably the highest of anyone in the tournament. And yeah, he's just been kind of insane, and a lot of RRQ is somewhat going to be reliant on Jemkin. But the thing is, I don't really want to deny them that, because Jemkin is kind of that good, I think. So I think RRQ would also fit into this Dark Horse kind of category, and at the top of it as well, right? I think that obviously these other 3 teams that I've put in here for now are all have, I think, more questions than RRQ do, actually. Okay, now moving on to Team Liquid. And here's the thing about Team Liquid's map pool. It's very up and down, right? Their Lotus is good, their Split is good. They haven't played a single game of Pearl. They've banned it every single game they've played, right? So, but the thing is, there's still big weaknesses in their map pool as well, right? I still think there are maps that you can target for them. Obviously, we don't know how their Sunset will be. But yeah, they are just straight banning Pearl, and they almost always pick Split. They are the only team to have a player with negative rounds above replacement, and they've got 2 of them. And I think that this roundup of replacement stat does really kind of show that this is the Nats and Kiko show. And if these two aren't frying, then Liquid aren't doing very well. And for that reason, I'm going to put Liquid in the Swiss stage Sallies. Okay, and now on to Team Heretics. And for Heretics, we've seen them be absolutely dominant on Haven, right? Here's the second 9.5 that I've given out for the Haven. I mean, just look at the numbers. It's really good. And then you've got kind of like a bit of a mix, you know, kind of decent map pool overall, I think, for Team Heretics here. They also had been banning Fracture a decent amount of time. And, you know, they're picking up a map that Sunset, historically, they were very good at, right? If you take a look at their rounds of replacement, you know, you've got Miniboo and Rienz kind of popping off here as well. So I know the Team Heretics have just come off a kind of, you know, very bad, disappointing grand final, but I think overall, when you look at their split, they've been kind of consistent across the board of being pretty good on quite a few different maps. They're getting rid of a bad map for them and picking up a map that historically they've been one of the best in the world at. I think I'm going to put Team Heretics in the contenders. Now, would I put them above Sentinels or not? Probably do have a little bit more faith in Team Heretics. And then we come to Fnatic, and for Fnatic, they actually have the second highest overall map score that I gave to any team. Again, this is being kind of boosted by the fact that they don't have kind of Pearl dragging them down. They really only have one weakness, and this is something that always annoys me in, EMEA, is that Giants were the only team to pick Ascent against Fnatic. And guess who won that map? Giants. For some reason, everyone seems to think, oh, we'll pick Lotus against Fnatic. Let's do that. You know what? Let's play Lotus, Split, and Icebox against Fnatic. Surely that will go well, right, guys? Now, in terms of what they were banning, of course, they are just banning Pearl pretty much every game as long as their opponent doesn't ban it first. Interestingly, on the rounds of replacement, because again, Kayak is like one of, if not the highest rated player in terms of VLR rating, but actually Crashies is the highest in terms of rounds above replacement. But for Fnatic, I think really the debate is whether they're in the contenders or in the favorites. Now, I do still have some suspicions about, you know, their Sunset historically hasn't been great, so I think I'm going to put them at the top of the contenders for now. And then finally, we have Wolves Esports. And with Wolves, you don't even need to take a look at the stats because they're going up here towards the favorites. I'll put them just below G2, but yeah, they're definitely up there towards the favorites. No one needs to ask any questions about that, and that's the video. Goodbye.